Hey everyone, welcome to this, which is video number 6 in an 8-part series about communication tips for leaders. In the previous videos, I gave you all sorts of tips, such as asking questions and how that is going to make you a more effective communicator as a leader, or this thing called the huddle. Video number 2, I explained what the huddle is all about. And I even gave you some public speaking tips. And in today's video, this is the video for those of you who are managing remote teams and you don't have the luxury of seeing everyone in person on a daily basis. And even if you are a leader who usually sees people in the office, so many of us throughout the global pandemic have had to pivot and figure out how to use Zoom meetings or other virtual platforms to connect with our teams on a regular basis. At my job, I remember a year and a half ago, so late 2019, we didn't have any Zoom meetings. Like, it was either a phone call or it was an in-person meeting. And today, I average 3 or 4 Zoom meetings per day. And that is probably many of you who are watching this video. You went from not using Zoom very often to using it incredibly frequently. There are a few key tips that I believe are essential for any leader to be considered an effective communicator over Zoom. The first, especially if you haven't used Zoom before, you need to know how the platform works. You can't have the issue of logging in and your microphone's not working, or your webcam's not working, or your name, you can't figure out how to change your name, or any of these things. They make you look like a noob, like an amateur at Zoom. And that right there, it doesn't matter if it's before you've said anything, people already will be questioning your communication skills because they'll realize that you don't really understand this technology or how Zoom works. And you don't want to have that impression. You want to come across as you know what you're doing, you're prepared, you're ready to use the platform. There's a couple other things to keep in mind to be a great leader and a great communicator as a leader on Zoom. One is to be looking directly at the camera. Now, eye contact is an important skill to have in regular public speaking, face-to-face, when you're talking to a room and you're looking around and you're making sure that everyone is paying attention. But on Zoom, that looks a little bit different because eye contact is looking right at that camera lens, which might be awkward because everyone's faces might be below that, and you're tempted to look down at people's faces as you're talking to them, but the truth is people are just going to see your forehead. You need to be looking directly at the camera lens because that is eye contact for them. And it takes some getting used to. It takes some adjusting to be able to look directly into that lens. But the more you practice that and focus on it, maybe even have a sticky note reminder on your computer to be looking there, it's going to come across as impactful communication on Zoom. The second tip has to do with virtual backgrounds, and it's completely up to you how you want to approach this. I've heard arguments for and against. I prefer not to use a virtual background. Now, I get it. Some people are in spaces where they have a bunch of clutter, or they're in a difficult room where there's stuff happening behind them. And I understand the temptation or sometimes the necessity of using a virtual background, but there's a couple things to consider. One is that from a psychology standpoint, it's actually been shown that there's this little layer of distrust that happens when somebody uses a virtual background, because whether or not we know what's happening, subconsciously we question, what is that person hiding? Like, why can't I have my background normal? Why can't I see what's behind them? And the person might not even realize that they're thinking this, but there is that little subtle layer. And if you can eliminate that, also, I've seen so many terrible virtual backgrounds where it's almost this green screen where the hair is blending into the background, or they get up and walk into the invisible ocean behind them and they disappear into it. And it takes away from the professional setting. So if it's possible to have a backdrop or even just a nice painting behind you or something like that in a clean, organized room, I think that comes across more positively. And again, it's these little impression things. You're not actually talking and physically communicating, but they still impact people's impressions, which will impact how they think and see you as a communicator. The final tip, and this is perhaps the most important tip, and that is if you are leading a meeting, really take charge and call people out specifically to answer questions. I have been part of so many meetings where there's a general question that's asked and something along the lines of, what are everyone's thoughts on this? Who thinks that we should do this? And then there's silence. There's silence for probably 20 seconds. And then finally, two people go to speak at the same time and they're, oh, sorry. And it's painful. It's honestly painful. As a leader, what's much more effective, and people will feel like they're in a more professional Zoom setting, is to be able to ask somebody directly, Brett, what do you think about this initiative? And then after Brett has answered, what do you think, Cindy? Do you agree with Brett's point? Calling people out specifically and asking them to contribute, it's much more organized and it's more enjoyable to be part of those meetings. I hope these Zoom/virtual meeting tips were beneficial to you. Please, if you like this content, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and definitely check out the other videos as part of this playlist, which is all about effective communication for leaders. I'll catch you on the next one.